What kind of home can survive a place where the air itself seems determined to erase every trace of warmth? At 40 below, the Arctic is no longer simply cold. It becomes a presence, a force with intent, and warmth is its prey. Heat does not fade gently here. It is hunted. It is stripped away, pulled from the surface of everything in a matter of seconds, by a process most of us never stop to think about: forced convection. When winds of 40 or 50 miles an hour sweep across open tundra with nothing to slow them, they do not merely pass over a body or a wall. They peel away the thin molecular layer of warmth that clings to every exposed thing. Skin freezes in minutes. Breath crystallizes in midair. Even hardened materials turn brittle, rigid, unforgiving. But here is the deeper truth, the one that changes everything. This land is not just cold, it is an infinite heat sink. A void so vast and so hungry that any warmth you manage to create is swallowed almost the instant it exists. And so the real question, the one that quietly decided who lived and who did not, was never how to make heat. It was how to stop losing it. For most of human history, survival began with fire. But in the high Arctic there is no wood, no forest, no fuel for a lasting flame, and even a fire fed by animal fat throws only a small, fragile pocket of warmth against an enemy the size of a continent. A house with thin walls and sharp corners becomes a liability, bleeding heat through every seam. And yet, somewhere beneath that screaming wind, a family slept in darkness that was warm. A child breathed easy while the world above tried to kill everything it touched. One small flame was enough. For thousands of winters, it was enough. The question is how? The answer did not come from building a better wall. It came from a people who looked at the Arctic and made a decision that sounds almost like surrender, but was in fact the deepest kind of wisdom. The Thule, the ancestors of today's Inuit, understood something their bodies must have screamed at them every single day. You cannot win a fight against the wind. So they chose not to fight it at all. Instead of standing against the Arctic from above, they vanished from it. They sank their homes nearly 3 feet into the earth, dropping below the most violent layer of the world, the chaotic, wind-driven air that does all the killing. And in that single move, they stepped out of weather entirely and into geology. Because beneath the surface, the rules change. The wind disappears. The wild swings of temperature slow and soften. And there, frozen for thousands of years, the permafrost holds steady near 32 degrees, a kind of buried thermal battery. While the air above plunged to 40 below, the ground refused to follow, anchored by the sheer immensity of its own mass. To live inside that mass was to borrow its calm. But the wind was not finished, and neither were they. Above ground, a sharp-walled house catches the wind like a sail, and the pressure tears warmth out through every crack. So they gave the wind nothing to grip. They shaped the roof into a low dome, a curve with no edges and no flat faces, and the air simply slid over it and away, cutting their exposure by as much as 85%. And here is the part we forget. There were no blueprints. No degreed engineers, no calculations on paper. This was knowledge carried in the mouth and the hands, passed down across 1,000 years of migration, from grandparent to child, until the earth itself became a kind of inheritance. But a dome is only an idea until something holds it up, and here the Arctic posed a question that should have ended the entire experiment. With no wood, no forest, no timber for beams, what on earth do you build a roof from? The answer did not come from the land at all. It came from the sea. A single bowhead whale carried tens of tons of usable material, and buried in that vast body was something almost impossible to find anywhere else in this frozen world: natural structural geometry. The great curved jawbones, often more than 15 feet long, became the primary beams, and when they were set in a ring and leaned together, they formed an arch. That shape is no accident of convenience. It is one of the strongest forms in all of engineering. A flat beam fights gravity by bending, and bending is where things break. An arch does something smarter. It turns every ounce of downward force into compression, pressing the load evenly through the bone until the weight of winter snow only makes the structure more solid. The ocean, in the most literal sense, had become architecture. Over that skeleton they stretched thick animal hides to seal out the wind, and over the hides they laid a layer of tundra sod, sometimes 3 feet deep, set carefully with the roots turned inward. And this is where the house stopped being a structure and quietly became something alive. Those roots did not die. They kept growing in the dark warmth, weaving themselves tighter season after season, knitting shut every small crack and gap until the home wore a living skin that repaired itself. Inside that buried, breathing shell, a single lamp-burning seal or whale fat could lift the temperature by more than 100 degrees against the air outside, not by producing heat, but by refusing to let it leave. And yet that very perfection hid something deadly. The thing that kept them alive could just as easily kill them in their sleep. Think about what they had actually built. A shell so well sealed, so perfectly insulated, that warmth could no longer escape, and that was exactly the problem. Because if heat could not get out, then fresh air could not easily get in. Inside that quiet, glowing space, with the lamp burning low and bodies breathing through the long polar night, something began to gather in the stillness. Carbon monoxide, odorless and invisible. Carbon dioxide, rising with every breath. Moisture, thickening the air. The same stillness that held their heat so faithfully could slowly, silently fill the room with the very things that end a life, and it could happen while everyone slept, without a sound, without a warning. This is the cruel paradox at the heart of the whole design. The more perfectly you trap the heat, the more dangerous the air becomes. And so the challenge transformed once again. It was no longer a problem of solids of walls, roofs, and insulation. It became a problem of fluids, of moving air through the home in a way precise enough to carry away the poison without carrying away the warmth. Too much airflow, and the heat they had fought so hard to keep would vanish into the night. Too little, and the room itself would quietly become a grave. So they carved the answer into the very shape of the dwelling ventilation shafts above, a long entrance tunnel below, subtle channels that let cold fresh air slip in and stale air drift out, all without ever opening the home to the wind. This was no longer just shelter. This was engineering at its most delicate, life balanced on the movement of air you could not even see, a single invisible current standing between a warm night and a final one. And when you step back and see all of it working together, you realize this was never really a house at all. It was a single closed system, every part quietly doing its job. The earth beneath held the temperature steady. The buried, domed shape gave the wind nothing to take. The living skin of sod and root sealed the warmth inside. And that fragile, invisible current of air kept the people within it breathing through the night. No furnace, no fuel hauled across the ice, no power drawn from anywhere but the planet itself, just geometry, mass, and a deep understanding of how the world actually works. And so we finally arrive back at the question we began with. How did a family sleep warm through 1,000 winters with nothing but a single small flame? This is how. Not by making more heat, but by refusing to waste a single breath of it. And maybe that is the part we have quietly forgotten. We tend to believe the most advanced technology is the one that consumes the most power, the most fuel, the most force. But these people proved the opposite. The most advanced design is the one that understands exactly how little it truly needs. They did not build to conquer the Arctic. They built to belong to it. They did not fight the world. They learned to read it, to bend with it, and to live inside its rules. And perhaps, in our age of endless consumption, that is the oldest and most important lesson of all, the one still waiting for us in the shadows of the past, if only we choose to remember it.